If you missed the first videos, I'm Wes Kussmaul. I'm the CIO, CEO, and founder of the Authenticity Institute. In the previous video, we showed how the development of the Internet has left us with a wonderful outdoor public transport system that was once called by the still appropriate name, the Information Highway. So, what do highways bring us to? What do we call the spaces that highways bring us to? We'll give you a moment to think about it. In the meantime, we'll offer some hints. The first hint is the name of our set of tools and materials and methods for constructing that which highways bring us to. It's called the indoors infrastructure. The indoors infrastructure is about places. More specifically, it's about those bounded spaces that the information highway brings us to. Let's see, bounded indoor spaces that highways bring us to. What's the name for that again? I'm thinking they're called, help me out. Indoor spaces that highways bring us to. Are they VPNs? Intranets? Private clouds? Portals? Networks? Nah, none of those sounds like something I'd take a highway to get to. Tunnels? Well, tunnels. That's getting closer. A tunnel is kind of indoors. At the same time, it's part of the highway. Existing use of technology gives us a secure tunnel between your browser and a server. A tunnel is a pretty secure structure in the middle, but unlike most built structures, it's wide open at the ends. After all, a tunnel is a special kind of, I think you got it. We're talking about buildings. Bounded indoor spaces where we can get things done or just hang out in quiet enjoyment. Buildings are not commando outposts surrounded by barbed wire, the guardhouse called a firewall or intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system. Rather, they're office buildings and clubhouses and residences and schools, bounded online spaces that are constructed according to indoors infrastructure standards. Facilities that are built in accordance with the indoors infrastructure standards do not work like VPNs or bulletin boards or portals or, for that matter, websites. They don't occupy physical space, but they are buildings. Their navigation and access controls are familiar to anyone who knows how to use a building. While the visible surfaces of an indoors building are made of the familiar rendering paints of web browsers, under the surface, the framing and wiring and plumbing are all made of something called PKI, which we'll define or actually redefine later. The indoors infrastructure is part of the quiet enjoyment infrastructure. The quiet enjoyment infrastructure, QEI, consists of 12 components which fall into 3 groups which deal with people, places, and things. The people part is the authenticity infrastructure and consists of the first 6 components of the quiet enjoyment infrastructure. The places part is the indoors infrastructure, consisting of QEI components 7 through 11. And the things part is the common vocabulary infrastructure, which includes only the 12th component. Quiet enjoyment is the legal term for a building that is built to code, carries an occupancy permit, and delivers security and manageability to its occupants. And when we're done, that is, when you join us and help us get it done, that's precisely what QEI, the quiet enjoyment infrastructure, will deliver to you and to all who participate. It's exactly what your office or home landlord is obligated to provide to you, the tenant in good standing. Quiet enjoyment. So, what is a building? A building is a set of bounded spaces built with appropriate construction materials. Certainly not the same materials you'd build a highway with. That carries an occupancy permit that was signed by some individuals, specifically by a professionally licensed architect, a professionally licensed contractor, and a professionally licensed building inspector. What distinguishes an indoor space from a pile of construction materials or a shack in a third world slum? Simple. Architecture, building codes, code-qualified building materials, building permits, and occupancy permits. Each of those is generated by individuals with professional licenses that are issued by public authority. What happens when we rely on tools and materials that attempt to create security by treating online spaces as though they're Fort Apache or commando outposts in the jungle instead of buildings? Let's take a closer look at how inauthenticity manifests itself online and offline, so we can see how the authenticity infrastructure will fix the problem if people, guided by thought leaders such as you, are willing to make use of a new kind of online space, indoor space. You're probably familiar with websites whose address starts with HTTPS. Consider the little lock icon on such quote-unquote secure sites. Those sites use a type of digital certificate called a site certificate. The technology of site certificates is a simplified version of PKI, and it's secure. The site certificate is essential to building a tunnel between you and the server. No, wait, that's typical security speak. The tunnel is between your browser and the server. If you're a person and not a browser, then this distinction between you and your browser is important. Let's not confuse the two. That's exactly the kind of facile assumption that got us into the big trouble. Another facile assumption has to do with outdoor tunnels. If there's going to be a tunnel, it had better be like a pedestrian bridge between two bounded buildings, with you and all the people and information you want to deal with in a particular role, work, family, social, inside the appropriate space in the building. A highway tunnel provides security, it's true. Security between two outdoor spaces, i.e. two insecure spaces. Or two spaces whose bad guy, good guy approach to security makes them unusable for anything meaningful. But for now, let's humor the security experts and pretend the tunnel provides some kind of security. The tunnel walls are indeed secure. In the past, that seemed to satisfy people, but that's changing. People are getting smarter. People are starting to understand that authenticity is not a technology issue. Technology aside, who checked out the site owner and issued the digital certificate attesting to their legitimacy? In this ad, the "without the hassle" means your criminal enterprise can get a site certificate from this reseller. Yes, certificates are sold by dealers as though they're bags of potato chips. Not sure I'd want to give these guys my credit card number. That real certificate is very valuable if you want to foist off a fake banking site on a real bank's customers, for example. Can you imagine if the physical world worked like this? But this is really how the veneer of authenticity is sold online. This is what the security and reliability of our global information infrastructure is built upon. The widespread problem of fraudulently issued site certificate caused the certification industry to come up with the extended validation scheme. You know, sites where the address bar turns green. The extended validation scheme is already falling apart for reasons that should be obvious to anyone who understands human nature. Top left is a birth certificate for a Cabbage Patch doll. Lots of fun for kids. Top right is a real birth certificate. In the middle are uniforms. Don't try faking the one on the right. Then there are passports, a Microsoft.NET passport identity credential, and a real passport. Use whatever name you want for the one on the left, but don't try that with the one on the right. The essential ingredient of authenticity is duly constituted public authority. That's the authority that is gathered and applied by state as opposed to government. But when the appearance of authenticity is merchandised in pawn shops along the information highway, the internet, or at least the way we use the internet, becomes broken. So let's take a look at a few more of the problems that come from doing indoor things outdoors, and at the materials of the indoors infrastructure that will solve the problem. Tune in to our next video entitled Construction Materials.